I am not a native Californian, but I have lived in California since 1985. And I got to say, I love living here. I am not going to be one of those folks who leaves for Austin or Idaho or North Carolina, at least not yet. And it's really interesting because as someone in business who associates with folks in the construction industry in business in California, there's a lot of frustration that we have around the regulations that were put in place with good intention and yet have become increasingly complex, and as a result of that have hindered the development and the building of homes and businesses and a variety of different structures that would really benefit people. And ultimately, that's the game that we're in, isn't it? We are not just in the game of making money, but we know that what we produce as contractors has a tremendous positive impact on people's lives. And that's why I'm happy today to welcome Richard Douglas to Construction Genius. He is the Southern California Division President of Trumark Homes. And Trumark has made a name for itself as an expert in navigating the processes that surround building projects in California. And so we begin our conversation today with, you could say, a critique of those processes, not a critique of the goals of the process. I know that I'm happy that the air quality in 2023 here in California is way better than the air quality in the 80s. So it's not the goal that's being critiqued, but it's the process towards the goal. And from that, we then pivot into a conversation around why construction is such a great industry and how we can craft a message that will attract the variety of people that we need that have creative, technical, engineering, sales, and even political talents, so that we can build those teams together that will enable us to take our companies where we want them to go. And then finally, we have a conversation around leadership. Richard has been in a variety of different leadership roles over the years, and he comes from the perspective that a leader is very much a coach. And we talk about some of those fundamental aspects of coaching individuals to perform at the highest possible levels and how we can take those perspectives, enact them in our companies, and develop better people. So it's a wide-ranging discussion, but I think it's one that you'll find very enjoyable. Reach out to Richard on his website, trumarkco.com, and feel free to give the show a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts, and enjoy my conversation here with Richard. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Richard, welcome to Construction Genius.
Great to be here, Eric. Thanks for asking me to join you.
It's a pleasure. You've been in the industry for a very long time, and I'd like to ask you, what is the biggest change you've seen in the construction industry over the last, 40 years of your experience?
Sure. I think the biggest change is, interestingly, is not really how we build things. It's all the regulations that affect the way we build things and the time it takes to build them and what it takes to bring a particular product to market is 90% regulation and only 10% construction.
What is the wisdom in those regulations from your perspective, and then the unwisdom?
Well, I think the wisdom was born of very legitimate needs to address huge environmental issues. If you go back 30, 40 years, the air quality, if you went to parts of our inland empire, you couldn't breathe. The air quality was horrible. We dumped crap into the oceans. Basically things ran roughshod. A lot of that has so there was. I don't think there's any question that anyone with a sane mind would say we need to do things to aid our environment and stop the impacts we're creating it. And I think we've made huge success that way. A lot of it based on technology, just the way things go together, and obviously wisdom and all that. So it was born of a good cause. But today we've layered and layered and layered and layered upon that to where now we have a massive shortage of housing, especially and housing for not just what people have called affordable housing, but housing for some of the mainstream of our society. Nurses, police officers, the rank and file people can't afford to live here. And that's, I think, so we have to look at regulation. Not that we would give anything back in terms of, we're not going to obviously degrade the water, degrade the air, things like that. But there has to be a little bit more flexibility and understanding of the environment. The environmental conditions today are more social and personal in the sense of just what it takes for people to live and thrive.
It's interesting because we're speaking specifically of California here. I saw a picture recently of Huntington Beach. I think it was in the 1930s or something like that. And you had these oil derricks lined up on Huntington Beach. And I think, are you in Newport Beach?
Our office is in Newport Beach, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see you.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And so I wholeheartedly agree that much of the progress that we've made is tremendously beneficial. And yet it seems like with anything, it becomes excessive. And you have a background in political science. That's your academic background. From your perspective, how can we begin to make incremental changes in how the regulations are structured so that some of the more burdensome regulations can be modified and we can actually address some of the housing issues that we are facing in California at the moment?
Right. That's a very complex question. I'll attempt to answer it. And let me go back a half a step.
Sure.
I think that'll help provide some perspective to my comments. And we said, and I've been here a long time, and you mentioned Huntington Beach and the oil derrick. So I was born and raised in Southern California. I was born and raised in San Clemente, California, when I was growing up and still is today, one of the most bucolic places imaginable. Extremely fortunate to live. It's on the ocean. It's got great beaches. It's a wonderful lifestyle. And when I grew up, it was rural. So to drive to Huntington Beach and see the oil derricks was just commonplace. And Southern California was basically oil, pastures, real estate. But the environment then was so pristine in San Clemente, California. I would get off school, go down to where now Dana Point Harbor is. But there was no harbor then. We'd pull abalone off the rocks.
Wow.
You could fit I'd go hunting after school in the backcountry. For dove and quail. So it was like the country. So when I talk about when I say I'm an environmentalist, I'm an environmentalist. I can't imagine what that I would ever do anything that would promote pollution of water or degradation of the environment and plants, animals, and things like that. I think that all those oil fields that have been cleaned up and the technology that's been they still extract oil. And oil was never a pollutant. It was really, oil was it's a natural hydrocarbon. The chemicals that went to create the extraction of oil are harmful and toxic, and those need to be regulated. So my point in all that is, I come from a point of view that is not just like regulation is bad no matter what.
Yep.
Regulation absolutely had its place, but and I think it's made huge improvements to the environment. But the thing that is brutal today, is the fact that key people that form the backbone of our society can't afford to live here. And so again, nurses, police officers, teachers, my kids, healthcare for elderly people. And so, I think if we need to redefine, I guess that's part of the social, cultural, and mental health environment that is now much more under assault than the original physical environment. Not that we should give those physical things up, but I think we just need to kind of rebalance the deck. And because the other part of your question is, I think in California we use the term NIMBYs, not my backyard, or anti-growth.
Yeah.
And every one of us, including me, is like that. So
yes.
there's a mental. I'm in the business. I build homes, and sometimes those homes go in people's backyards, and people don't like that, and if it was me, I wouldn't like it either. So we have to. It's always an attempt to kind of overcome those natural obstacles. But I think the only way we can do that is with a recognition that these other things that are so critical, that our social infrastructures is breaking down because of the barriers of housing, and that just redefines, I think, the narrative a little bit. That I think in today's world is that narrative has actually been eclipsed by, I'll call them false hopes. Is that somehow the state by its regulation is going to force and mandate housing down the throats of local government. I think is short-sighted and it's not going to be productive.
So let's just imagine for a moment that you're up in Napa at the French Laundry restaurant, and you were with Governor Newsom, and you had an opportunity maybe to get with him and some of the folks that in the industry. I know that you're involved in a variety of different industry associations. What would you say to him in terms of being able to maintain the progress that we've made with the environmental aspects of conserving the environment, as we discussed, and yet being able to practically address these human issues related to housing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that, and it's only that this door is just cracked open here in recent days, not even weeks. Is we have to have a more comprehensive look at CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, and because that's really it was a regulatory vehicle that was connected to everything I've been talking about up till now. And I remember when it came out, and it was after Earth Day, and it was in the 70s, and it was valid for all the reasons I mentioned, is because there was pollutants and things like that. So I say we need to look at that and say, but within CEQA is layers and layers and layers of other sorts of regulatory bureaucracy that can be alleviated, and really more, I'll say, in an urban context where I use the term, we don't need to go invade pristine natural land. We need to recycle uses and whatnot that's on existing land in urban environments. And I think there needs to be incentives for the conversion and repurposing of those dilapidated or aging land uses. We don't drive around in cars. There's land uses that were created in the 60s and 50s. We don't drive around in cars, and the technology that we live in isn't from the 50s and 60s. It's modern. So we need to just, even though the needs are so massive, we can't attack it on a massive scale. We got to take it on a kind of individual, incremental scale, and start with the most reasonable things that can be converted, and create incentives for that. Incentives for landowners to convert their land for types of housing, and incentives for local government to facilitate a fast conversion of those uses to housing.
Yeah, so the speed aspect there, that has to do with the amount of regulation and the review of the process. What do you think about the idea of exempting certain projects from the CEQA review? Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's exactly what I just said. I think there needs to be a class of land uses and a class of objectives that is exempt for that reason, and or at least fast tracked. Not even. I'll give you. Here's an example. Just think about this. Right? When my company creates a project somewhere, community, and civil engineers, create. The maps, the environment. They create the platform, the land use platform. There's lots where we put our houses, and pipes in the ground that convey sewer and water and all those sorts of things. And those things are put together by guys that were really good students in school, good in math, all the things that we'd admire, and have licenses, professional licenses. They also take on professional liability if their designs were inadequate. So one, they certify that the designs are to the highest standards. Two is if they're not, they are subject to liability, to being sued and having damages. They take those plans and they take them into local government, many times that are being checked and reviewed by people who don't have any of those certifications,
right?
Have none of the liability, and very little incentive to move that along. That just on a basic logic, why does that make sense? Um, and those plans will take, we call it the process. What if it takes a year to get through that process and say multiple, the term quote unquote plan checks? What are they checking?
Right.
I'm not just saying that we would turn a blind eye to inadequate design, but we have real smart people that have really high levels of certification, and I think we need to kind of understand that's we need to kind of rely on that and deregulate what we're doing there. And if it shaves half the process in half, that's an increment that makes a difference. And I haven't changed a single regulation in that whole discussion I just gave. It's just simply a recognition of things are crazy when you think about that.
So it's not so much changing the regulations, it's changing the process related to those regulations.
Both. It's both. I think
Okay.
we do need to change. We do still need to change some of the regulations. And notice, I'm not saying, there's regulations that sometimes regulations can be good. So for instance, an earthquake happens and we determine that the way the ground moves, now we know about how we reinforce the houses that we build with additional steel and whatnot. And so, they update the building code. That's a good regulation, because it makes a house safer to live in. It makes it more easy to stand up to, hazards. And there's other examples of that with fire and all this. So technology and learning and regulations that are for legitimate health and safety, absolutely. I'm not saying that at all.
Right.
But regulation that says I want to convert a dilapidated shopping center into housing, and I've got to go through a 2 or 3 year process. And even if that project's approved, by the way, if that project, let's say it's your project and you take it through, and you get the local government to approve it, if I'm an opponent to you, I can sue you. I can sue you and tie you up for years, and I have no liability for that. In other words, if you spend $1 million in legal fees to get back what you originally got by the local government, you're out $1 million. You can't come to me and say you wasted all my time and with a specious lawsuit. So I have literally I have a high incentive to thwart you, and I have no exposure to thwart you. I would start right there, just in CEQA alone. Opponents can contest and sue something that's legitimately approved through an arduous process with no jeopardy.
Yeah.
Where else does that happen?
Yeah. How do we begin to, as an industry, marshal our forces, marshal our voice to make progress here? And also, it's some of this stuff is kind of like singing to the choir, right? We can all sit around in a room shaking our heads in agreement, but it's the other parties, both governmental and non-governmental, that we have to begin to, socialize these things with, talk about them so that we can begin to make progress. So as an industry, what insights do you have that might help our audience?
Well, I think you said the right word there, which is to socialize it, and I say that this is still a democracy, and people have a voice, and there's still the democratic process where people vote. And so I say so really it's mustering, it's recognition of how acute the problem is, so that the same people that are on the streets with placards for myriad social causes, whatever they may be, right, they show up for, and there's all sorts of good reasons to do that. They need to start showing up and saying, "Listen, I can't live here anymore." And if I'm a parent and my kids are going to have to move to some other state because they can't live here, or I'm not getting good health care because the nurses can't afford to live here. They've got to move to another state. So there has to be, I'll call it social upheaval, in a legitimate, it's all of us. It's like telling my kids, listen, you guys need to start going to local government meetings. You need, it's all of us that are, as we recognize we're being affected in a lessening of the quality of life. So, because essentially what's this housing situation is it's like the old punk band, right? Social distortion. It's social distortion.
Right on.
And you got to battle social distortion by getting out there. It's like you got to rise up, and think of all the other causes people rise up for. It's like, well, those are important, but not being able to live here and get good health care and get a good education, have someone seeing your family, I think that's worth going and marching around. That's what we got to do.
So it's interesting because what we have to be able to create is a narrative that isn't centered around I'm a builder and I want to build because I want to make money. And I think it's fundamental for us as an industry to always keep in mind that, yes, we do make money when we build projects on time and for the right people and all that kind of good stuff. But we are having such a tremendous positive impact on our society through what we do. And we have to really sit in that and own it and be able to articulate it to the other parties involved in this discussion.
That's right. That's exactly right. And because that's exactly it is, people they need to have a place to live to provide essential services and socially harmonious things for all of us. Again, I just go back to the core of society. We're not talking, the ultra wealthy or the unfortunately, the people that live on the streets and things like that. This is rank and file.
Yep.
Every day. It's pure. My rent costs so much.
Yep.
I make so much.
Yep.
Food is so much, and you know what? I can't make it here anymore.
Yeah.
It's not. There's not some universal solution. I think that the government says these cities are going to have to create tens of thousands of more houses and things like that. You can't do that without going back to CEQA. And I'm saying that there's, but I think we have to start in ways that are just a little more basic and fundamental, and hopefully that then, again, the conversion of dilapidated or defunct land uses, right? Just the way we go to retail. We don't live in sort of in commercial retail the way we did 30, 40 years ago. There needs to be incentives to fast track those things through to convert to housing so that these people that would otherwise move away don't have to move away.
Yeah, it's interesting because you use the idea of social upheaval, and I'm just wondering here in California specifically, what is it going to take for the people who are in power or who have power to either make the decisions themselves or put the energy in themselves or to rally others in order to make some changes? Because it feels like, and I'm just talking, I've lived in California not all of my life, but most of my life. And it feels like there's this sort of behemoth, the state is this behemoth that seems so difficult to move, particularly if you're coming from one particular perspective. It seems like the state here in California is designed to obviously perpetuate itself and just move along the road of more increasing complexity and difficulty.
That's right. And that behemoth that it's a perfect way of saying it, but its core DNA is regulation, and a lot of it is sequence. I would use the word for your description there is that's the process.
Yeah.
Everything is caught up in the process.
Yeah.
It is the term I used a minute ago with the engineers having to put their plans in. We actually call that the plan check process.
Yeah. And
the process is elongated, multi-dimensional. If you step back and say, well, why? Why is it? Why is there such a long process? How do you simplify that process?
Yeah.
And that's really, where I go. And part of it is, the core regulation is the California Environmental Quality Act, born of a legitimate reason.
Yes.
And still contains legitimate reasons, and yet other pieces of it, it's still it's the thing that dictates the process.
Yes.
The process has gotten out of hand.
The goal is noble. The process is not.
The goal is noble. The process is not only not. It's the process is insidiously against progress.
It's very interesting.
It's been turned into the noble cause has been turned into a vehicle where its result is almost complete inaction. And inaction has created an absolute deficit of necessary housing, and that creates social distortion. And when I said, I'm not talking about the truly unfortunate, the people that live on the streets and everything else. That gets that has a much higher headline value, right? People are, suffering out in the cold air and all that stuff. And it definitely, it gets everyone's attention. But that sort of is the definition of housing. And I'm saying that that's true, but there's a definition that's much broader that affects all of us. your kids, my parents, healthcare providers. You look at the demographics, people, there's going to be more people that need care. Who cares for them? People that make a certain wage, where are they going to live? How will care be given if the people that give that care can't afford a place to live? That's different than a person on the street. You put those two together, it's a pretty big set of issues. You got to change the process.
Hey, this is Eric. Quick commercial break. Manscaped reached out to me wanting to sponsor Construction Genius, and I turned them down. Why? Because we don't need to talk about Manscaped on Construction Genius. We need to talk about this book, Construction Genius, effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. This is a distillation of the wisdom that we have discussed and I have shared with you on my podcast and through the various leadership programs that I've developed over the years. And it's in about 120 pages. Actually, no, I take that back. It's not 120 pages. It's longer than that. It's 180 pages. But it's an easy read. It gets right to the point. And if you run out to Amazon and purchase this for just $20, I know that you will get a tremendous return on investment if you read it and then use it and apply it in your construction company. So go out there and do that. Let me know what you think about it. And now let's get back to the interview with Richard. We're going to put a little bookmark right there. This is obviously something that we can take a tremendous amount of time. I'd just like to encourage the listeners, whether you're in California or not, that as a company, you must get involved with other people with similar interests and be thinking through how you can influence these processes that are hindering excellent aims. But I, as we're talking through this, Richard, we're touching on one of the key aspects of running a successful construction company, and also why people may even want to be involved in construction, because it gives a myriad of opportunities for people with different skill sets to contribute to a noble cause. One of those being this political skill that you were describing there, having that understanding of how politics works and being able to navigate those waters. That is a skill that can definitely bring great value to a company. As we're thinking about one of the major issues that a lot of construction companies have, and that's attracting talent to their organizations. In your view, as you've looked at the industry over and been involved over so many years, how is it that a construction company can craft an offer, so to speak, to a wide variety of talented people that might attract them to being involved in the construction industry?
Well, great. That's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And so it goes like this: is that hey, and here we are in 21st century America, where a lot of the things that we buy and our consumer goods are made somewhere else. This is one of the last bastions of where we actually build things here with our, for the large part with our own hands, like we've done for hundreds of years. And it's a noble cause, like you mentioned, but it's also a very noble. It's a great opportunity when you consider that there's a process to that. There's a process to the way we go about building a product that someone's going to live in or eat in a restaurant and everything else, and that involves, a teacher I had in college. She called it her advice was be a Renaissance man. And that sounds kind of that sounds like weird. So what does that mean? A Renaissance man is who was a Renaissance man? Leonardo da Vinci was a Renaissance man.
Right.
He painted the Mona Lisa. And the Sistine Chapel was an exquisite artisan.
Yep.
But he was also mechanically adept, where he created his drawings were depicting flight and even helicopters.
Yep.
So he was technically based.
Yep.
And he was, to your earlier points, he had political knowledge, so he could convince the governments that he lived in, the villages, so he could create his great artworks. And then he had a spiritual dimension so that he could capture his art. So his physical, political, financial, he had to nuzzle up to the various, Medici bankers and all that to fund his processes. So if you take that to the modern world, right, here's why a person would want to be in the construction or home building business is if you have a creative talent, there's a place for you. If you are analytical, there's a place for you. If you have the political skills, as you mentioned, place for you. Sometimes people have multiple skill sets, which we value greatly. On and on. So you can build things with your hands. You're a craftsman, whatever it is. It is the only thing left in America that has those components that exist, that coexist at the same time, and need to be collaborated on to create the products that are trying to achieve the social cause we've been talking about. Name one other endeavor left in our country that is like that, where you can actually self-actualize and collaborate and work with people of every different, all these other social enterprises we talk about, whether it be you name it, ethnic, whatever it is, doesn't matter. When you're in our business, if you're at the table and you have those skills, that's what matters. And I think that's where. My goal is to try and get that out there and tell the young people, hey, listen, you should consider this, and you can try this for a while. And if you have this skill, there's a place for you. It's really I'm surprised. And if you if you want to go through the process and have that patience, there's a place for you too. So
I think it's interesting. I've been like many of us, we've been hearing lately about Chat GPT and the AI that's coming, and I use it all the time in my business for various things. But when it comes to putting work in place, when it comes to negotiating a contract, when it comes to communicating as a team, these things, the Chat GPT is not going to take away. It may enhance, it may help, it may give creative ideas in terms of how to put a building together, but that fundamental human aspect of construction isn't going away. And you so well say, it's interesting because you may not be a Renaissance person, but you could be a Renaissance company in the sense that our company is not just full of people who are technical or people who are analytical, but every aspect of human experience and human background can be seen in a construction company.
Exactly right. And you touched on something that is probably the nearest and dearest of them all, which is if you have a potential, you can be a coach. Someone has to bring all that together.
Yeah.
So there's from a leadership standpoint, and getting people to collaborate and creating that harmonious sort of environment where people can use their best skills and are recognized for their best skills. Now you've reached a sort of the social spiritual plane. This it's like if those of us that grew up playing sports or whatever, you're on a team and you're grooving with that team and your teammates. It's like the ultimate. That's always my goal, is to kind of create that environment where people are just celebrating your teammates' successes, right? And because it contains all those elements. And you mentioned one, even the negotiating. If you're a legal person, it's got everything. And but someone's got to bring it together, and it's got to be harmonious. Because if those pieces aren't working together, it doesn't do as well. So there's leadership skills and motivational skills and collaborative skills. Call it whatever you want, some sort of form of social skills.
Let me ask you about that in your career, if I could. Many people struggle. Let's say I'm a very good project manager, and I know how to build a project, or in your industry, I know how to get a development built, multiple homes. But then they get promoted, and they're in a role where they're no longer project centric, but they're now people centric. I know that you've been through a number of different roles and in your career. What was the biggest challenge you had when you had to shift from a project-centric to a people-centric perspective, and how did you overcome that challenge?
That's a great question. I think it goes back to being able to communicate, even though you shift, still having a recognition that your job is to put together people with those multiple diverse skill sets into a whole.
Mm.
And a lot of it was, mentoring, and learning from other leaders I work with, and they just gave simple advice, which is, hire great people, let them do what they do best. Don't just watch it to the extent that they if things don't get disharmonious. But it was really just letting go and recognizing that The whole idea, if you've attracted the right people with the right blend of skills, is to kind of let them go. It's organic. That's the organization. That's what it is. It's a living, breathing organism. And so anyway, that's the basics of it. I think as I went through that, you have to learn to let go a little bit.
Mm.
You're always kind of coaching. I always look at the organization as so much of what I've done in my career has been what I learned. As a kid playing sports, I played every sport. And loved being on a team, and you learn how to get along. When you do that, you learn how to get along with people you may not naturally like.
Yep. Yep.
And other, so you learn how to deal with conflict.
Yep.
And you learn how to persevere. Those are all things that come from, sometimes it's suffering. You have to kind of go through that, and you learn. And I'm still learning. I'm as we speak, I'm adapting, to the modern world and how you try to apply those lessons. So,
let me ask you about that idea of coaching. In your role, I'm assuming you see yourself as a coach for your team. Is am I right there?
Unquestionably.
Okay, so how do you frame, let's say, a coaching conversation? You see someone, it's like if you were a coach of a sports team, you could see someone not performing on the field, and you take them aside and have a coaching conversation. In the context of your business, how do you frame a coaching conversation with the people who are reporting to you?
First, an open dialogue where you're highlighting just what I call fundamentals. There's always the fundamentals, and it's you start with, are we doing the fundamental things well? Let's talk about what those are, and what the prerequisites are. If you're an athlete, it's like you're going through some drills. We're going to observe the efficiency of how we do the fundamentals, and we're going to talk. If we note that there's some deficiencies there, we'll talk about how do we improve. Now we've moved on coaching. Okay, what we've determined how our execution of the fundamental base things we should be doing are going. Some are going well, some are not going well. What can we do to reinforce that? It's practice, practice, practice. If this is on a video screen behind me, you can't see it. I have John Wooden's pyramid of success, and it's one of those things that's timeless. He developed that 50 years ago, whenever it was.
Yep.
It's timeless, but it deals with that. It's about fundamentals and harmony and industriousness. So I talk about how do we get back to those things, because at the end of the day, it's the accumulation of the execution of those fundamentals that really gives you the good results. But it's discussed in a dialogue, or in a business sense, whatever, the basketball court or football field, whatever it is, it's reviewing how well you're doing the fundamentals, and how what can we do to improve? What can we do to adapt? Or old methods may not work as well as new methods. Let's talk about that. And basically, empowering your people to, part of it is listening. Like they have a voice too. They're responsible to do it. It's like open dialogue, trust.
So I really like this. Just very simply, you observe the behavior, or you observe the performance. You then discuss it with the person. And then from that discussion comes a new practice that someone initiates in order to improve on the fundamentals, with the perspective that if you execute the fundamentals well, that will get you towards the goal that you're looking to achieve. Did I hear that right?
That's right. And, it's like, in sports, that's like, they have video, right? They break down the video, every single play, every single time, and they analyze what went right, what went wrong, what would be a change. If you're in the military, they call it an after action report, and you review what went right, what went wrong, what you can do. And it's a constant loop, right, of action and orientation and adjustment. And but it's done in the context of it's collaborative, and you have to create. I think you have to create part of it is creating an environment where you can have, where it's not critical and not criticism in a negative criticism. It's all for what can we do to get better, and understand there's going to be mistakes made, and open and trust. So your subordinates have to trust that you're not there trying to drive them into the ground, and you trust that they are communicating, and being honest with you in terms of what they think is going on.
Yeah. That's excellent.
You're observing. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about your company, what you do, and how people can reach you.
Yeah. So Trumark Companies is the reason we call it companies is every now and then we still have like a commercial arm that we've used, or a non-residential, but we're mostly a residential developer and home builder. So and there's to be a home builder, you got to develop real estate. But sometimes you can be if you're a developer, you don't necessarily build homes. We do both. And so I head up our division in Southern California. We have a division in Northern California, which is headed by a different fellow, and one in Colorado. And we build in Southern California, basically in all the divisions, but in Southern California, we build a wide variety of homes, which you have to, because there's a wide variety of homes in extreme, very, very high end homes, and very, very, affordable homes, and all that. So we do a lot of urban products. Our degree of difficulty at Trumark is among the highest in the industry. So, and I've worked for big public builders and big divisions, and we compete with them. So we don't necessarily operate at the scale of the really big builders, but we operate in the same venues and with the same products as they do. And then I think another core DNA, going back to our discussion today, is we do, which a lot of other builders and developers don't do. We will wade into that entitlement process, the process of dealing with regulations and CEQA. So I'm speaking from, the standpoint of here's what we go through when we kind of go to battle. It's not theoretical. So, and we do a lot of that work, which is a little unusual for there's 20, 25 builders in our marketplace. Only a handful of them really do the hardcore entitlement stuff, and we do. So that's a lot to do with our founders. Their DNA came from that, so they're very tolerant of that. And then 3 years ago, our majority of our company was purchased by Daiwa House, which is the biggest home builder in Japan. And so that they're very supportive of our operating profile, and they've introduced, maybe in the next stage, going back to why you want to get why you want to work in this business is the next the next echelon, the next generation really has an opportunity, and this is where Daiwa House comes in. In Japan, they have much more manufactured means of doing housing. We want to get there. So it's all our industry in Trumark is kind of on the front edge of, I think, what's going to be that next generation and style of home building. Because what we do now is, we basically, the houses we build today are built not that much different than they were 100 years ago.
Yeah.
We have skip saws and things like that. And they get all the reinforcing I talked about from earthquakes, but we're still kind of banging sticks together out in the field, and we're we got to modernize that. So I'm on a different tangent there. Didn't mean to go there, but that's Trumark.
No problem. So again, you're down in Southern California, Santa Monica area. I'm down in SoCal. I know I'm going to be going down there. Actually, I'm going down there next week to take my daughter to the Getty. What is the one restaurant in Santa Monica I've got to hit if I'm in that area? I know that's a tough question.
I'll tell you. So I'm in Newport.
Newport Beach. Excuse me. Yeah, go ahead. Give me Newport Beach.
I'll tell you. Here's what I'll do is my VP of Sales and Marketing worked for a long time in Santa Monica, and she had an office in Santa Monica. She knows, and I will get that from her, and I will email it to you.
That sounds great. All right, Richard. Well, I really appreciate you getting on the show with us here today at Construction Genius, and thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure and honor to be asked. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening today to Construction Genius. I have a quick favor before you bounce away. Please give the show a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts. The reason why is because when you do that, the podcast is seen across the interwebs. And so it is really important that those reviews and those ratings occur. I'm looking on my Apple Podcast review right now, and we have 134 ratings for Construction Genius, 4.8 out of 5 stars, which is absolutely terrific. And so I really appreciate all of those folks who have reviewed the show. Looks like we got one here today, and I'll read it to you. Great show on how to achieve high performance in your construction company. Great show with advice that is pertinent to any company, not just construction. And then another one here, timely topic with good insight into how we should be moving forward as a country if we're to stay relevant. I'm always impressed with the quality of the interviews on this site. Intelligent, probing, but never confrontational. Such a refreshing change. That's a pretty good review right there. Anyway, how about you? If you haven't reviewed the show yet, wherever you get your podcasts, please run out there, give it a 4, 5, 3-star review, whatever the case is, whatever you think we've earned. Give us that review. Give us that rating. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.